That be easier if you
Oh, that would be a great thing to record.
spend time rehearsing and everything at that versus going into it where
Right.
people have just recently seen the music.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, 20 Fingers, 20 Toes was not recorded. A Swing Shift was never recorded. That was a boogie woogie opera.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and Bobby Driscoll has yet to be recorded, but I think Bobby Driscoll will be getting a production within the next year. And I just wrote a new one called Better Than Ever. And there is a commercial producer involved, but I don't know what his plans are for the property.
There's some singers that you're pretty friendly with.
Oh, I'm friendly with everybody. I'm always recording demos and things. So I've got like a stable of people I can always call on that I'm very happy with.
Well, there's some things you think are ready to go. We wouldn't have to spend time even recording them.
I don't know. I mean, I always like to take and go over everything, spend some time with it, and make sure it's 20 Fingers, 20 Toes should have been recorded. It was, it was done at the WPA. It split the critics right down the middle. And when the Times came in as negative, everyone lost interest. And then when we did it at the York, there was some interest in recording it again, but there were things about that production that weren't quite right in the casting. And so it just got pushed aside. And I've never published it. It's one of the shows I just like kept off on the side.
Okay, well, maybe we could lead into the things. When I officially say hello to you,
Okay.
I'm going to start with your early days, and then going off to college and
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Because I told you I'm originally from Baltimore.
Right, so we can discuss.
And Howard Ashman and Danny Littman and Damon Evans all did children's shows for me when we were in high school.
Did you not tell me that you were involved with A Mother's Kisses, that you went in?
I came and played rehearsal piano for a couple rehearsals for A Mother's Kisses. I was a rehearsal pianist for a couple of days in the Bernstein Mass as well.
But, would you venture an opinion on the show itself? You did see the production?
Which one? A Mother's Kisses?
Yes.
It was just not ready. It was one of those things that was a hot mess from top to bottom.
As I loved my ex-friend and I went to Slovakia and recorded the music there with Richard Ed.
I had heard about that. Yeah, when Richard did the revival of Damn Yankees, the Broadway revival, which 1996, something like that. He called me and asked me if I would play the auditions for the principal people, and I was delighted to go in and play. And we got to talk a great deal, and he was a very strange individual.
Yes,
I would have liked to have gotten to know him a little better.
This whole thing is that you had to be early. If you weren't early, what's the excuse for your not being there?
That's hilarious.
Jesus Christ to the President of the United States. Well, Mr. Biden, we don't have an appointment for 4 o'clock. It's 3:58. You were almost late.
He didn't like in the revival version. He hated the staging of Who's Got the Pain when they do the mumbo.
Okay.
And he would always say, "Are they going to do I Get a Pain when they do the mumbo?" He liked the staging of 6 months out of every year. He thought that was better than the Fosse staging, which was not even a dance. It was just, a choral number.
Did you ever hear the TV? I just recently heard the TV Damn Yankees with Phil Silvers playing the devil, Lee Remick. Remick.
I remember that.
It's on YouTube. You can watch it. And,
that's worth watching.
And there's this guy who's the guy who was in Maine, and then he grew up.
Was Frankie Michaels?
No, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was the
Oh, the one that was Roberta Sherwood's son, Jerry
Yes, yes,
Lanning.
yes,
Jerry
yes.
Lanning. Yes.
So the old guy is, I think now, a great singer from the past.
Mm.
So he starts to sing, I think, cappella needs what's the transformation song where
Oh, Goodbye, Old Girl.
Goodbye Old Girl.
Yeah.
So this wonderful singer from 20 years before sings it, not too spectacularly, and then suddenly Jerry Lanning, and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest transition.
Oh my God.
I called,
Oh,
called him. He's not returned my phone call.
oh.
He lives near 57th and 6th Avenue, and he has a production company. And I understand why he wouldn't want to return the phone call.
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure that he didn't pass away.
No, if you answer the phone, this is Jerry Lanning Productions. I mean, it sounds like Jerry Lanning. This is the former Jerry Lanning.
The little one died. The little boy, Frankie Michaels.
Yes,
he passed away.
Yes.
We did several big workshops of Golden Age musicals, and one of the ones we did was Carnival for Walt Disney, and it was Peter Gallagher played Paul.
I want to talk about this on camera.
Okay.
So let's start. We'll officially start. I will have a pause, and then I will introduce you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. This is Bruce Yeckel from Anything Goes. My friend had something to do. From 8 Broadway Grand. My friend Mike Dansicker had some involvement with. I don't think I've discussed his involvement with 8 Broadway Grand. Anyway, this is Mike Dansicker.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I am good. Let's start off with what is your involvement with 8 Broadway Grand? My title song is My First.
I had done a great deal of work for Mitch Lee. I had met him several times at the Jingle Company, Music Makers, and they were doing a revival of La Mancha with Sheena Easton and Raul Julia for Broadway.
Right.
And he needed someone to come in and reconfigure the Aldanza music for Sheena, because she was a pop singer and not a lyrically trained soprano. And so I went in and worked with her for a couple of sessions. And then I had always wanted to meet Albie Moore. I had met him very briefly when Singing in the Rain. He was brought in for several days singing in the rain to see what he could add, and some ideas that he might have had in his head to make the transfer from film to the stage a little easier. And I had always thought that the original staging of La Mancha was one of the shining lights of the American musical theater. And I got along very well with Mr. Moore, and I conducted many productions of La Mancha. A week here, 4 days there, 2 days here. It was sort of touch and go. And they were doing a new show called 8 Broadway Grand, and Mitch Lee wanted to see some singers, and they hadn't put a production company together yet. So I went in and played some auditions, and he said, I would like you to just be around for the production. And I said, well, I don't want to take on a new musical as conductor. And he said, would you like be the associate conductor? Would you just hang around in case we have a problem? I don't know the conductor. If the conductor's a problem, I might bump you up to conductor. And I read the show, and I really thought it was an original idea. I needed a little work, but I thought this could be interesting. I knew the choreographer very well, Randy Skinner. And I knew so many people involved. So I just I was around as like an associate conductor, never conducted it, obviously, and as also a pianist. And we just went with the wind.
What do you know of the recording he made?
I do know that he made a recording.
Or
That's all.
you were not involved in that?
I was not involved with it. No, he wanted me to write the dance music for the show. And I had done a show with Randy Skinner several years before for John Kenley called The Greenwich Village Scandals. It was a stock production that starred Sid Charisse, Rip Taylor, and Imogene Coca. And maybe one of the 10 most horrifying projects I had ever worked on in my life. Randy Skinner was wonderful. It had nothing to do with Randy. It was just a monstrosity. And I was being very choosy about what I was selecting to write dance music for. But I was glad I did it. And I got to know Mitch very, very well during the run of Ain't Broadway Grand, the very short run of Ain't Broadway Grand. And as you know, Mitch was sort of in the wings directing the entire production. There was a director, but everyone answered to Mitch Lee.
Were you in Candlewood? Did you go up to Candlewood at all before Broadway?
I didn't. I wasn't available to. I was asked to go to Candlewood, and some of the ideas that they actually played me the show. Mitch's assistant was the original conductor of Man of La Mancha. His name was Neil Warner. He has a very famous daughter who's an actress, Julie Warner. And he had been in the Jingle Company for many, many years. And he told me so many stories, La Mancha stories, you know, the unbilled orchestration credit for La Mancha. The orchestrations were billed to Music Makers Incorporated. And then when Cry for Us All opened, all of a sudden the orchestrations were billed to someone named Carlisle Hall. It's all very interesting and intriguing, but I didn't think the show was quite ready to be put together in 1 week's time. I thought they needed a little more time, so I didn't go with them. Did you see it at that stage?
I saw it at Candlewood. I just talked to the female, one of the female stars, I'm going to interview next week. And she said the end of the performance, they went to the theater and they were locked out of Candlewood. Nothing to do with Mitch Lee or Ain't Broadway Grand, but they were in arrears of taxes or something like that. So.
Oh yeah.
The last performance.
Who played Mike Todd up there?
Mike Burston.
Mike Burston was up there as well.
I was here. I go back to before there was Ain't Broadway Grand, there was Mike.
Yes.
In Philadelphia, with Lem Beck with his father was, well, what was his, was it Harvey or was
Harvey Lembeck? Harvey Lembeck.
But that's the only credit that I know for him. He must have done something else in life.
He did. Harvey Lembeck did a lot of La Manchas. It was a lot of Sancho.
So he had a big voice. That was.
Yeah, I assume. I don't think I ever met him. I mean, I saw him perform at some stage at the game. But you know, funny enough about Ain't Broadway Grand. The book was not Tom Meehan's best work. The lyrics were far from Lee Adams' best work. The score was well below the standard that Mitch had set for himself with La Mancha. But there was something intriguing about it. It didn't come together. It didn't all fit. But maybe it's people that knew about Mike Todd, knew about Joan Blondell, and understood who those characters were. Just found it interesting. I mean, a number of people would come up to me and say, hey, this is really working. And I would go, I just can't look at it. It's just, to me, it just looks like a great big mess. But, you know, you never know.
Okay, so now let's go back to the early years of Michael's life. You're in Baltimore from?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, in the Pimlico area, not far from the racetrack.
At the horse right here?
Right, it's the one. Yeah. And Baltimore at that time was a big city. It was the 6th biggest city in the country. And shows tried out in Baltimore. Shows on their way to New York did try out in Baltimore. And if they didn't try out there, they tried out in Washington, D.C., which is about 40 miles away. And they also tried out in Philadelphia. So between trips to New York and going to Washington, Philadelphia, and my hometown of Baltimore, I did get to see many, many, many shows on their way to New York.
So at what age did this start?
Started very young. My mother took me to see a play called The Rope Dancers with Art Carney and Joan Blondell. And my parents used to subscribe to the local theater guild, but my father wouldn't go to see the plays. He would only go to see the musicals. So my mom took me to see them. And I was just infatuated with it. I just thought it was the greatest thing ever.
So are you like 10 or what
Oh,
age?
yeah, even a little younger, maybe 8 or 9. And then when I finally saw a musical, The Damn Yankees and Lil Abner, I was in seventh heaven.
But did they think anything was inappropriate? Was there any show like Gypsy? They might have said, "Oh, that's not."
No, I actually, when Gypsy came through Baltimore with Mitzi Green as Mama Rose, and Bernadette Peters is one of the Hollywood Blondes, talking about 62 or 63. I cut school that afternoon and went downtown and saw it. And I was very impressed with the musical number, All I Need Is the Girl. That was the standout for me for Gypsy, nothing else. I just was knocked out by the staging of that number.
But how did you get involved in dance, the dance aspect?
I always used to, even as a kid, I played for dance classes. I was always around dancers.
So a dance number is always more appealing to you? Then?
Always, the dance
The
was
ballad.
always, the dances were always more appealing to me in a show. And of course, the shows that I saw try out, even my last year of junior high school, we went over to see a new musical tryout at the National Theater in Washington called Fiddler on the Roof. And it was a change in my thinking, in my approach to writing. It was just as good as it gets. It was just unforgettable.
Did you play music in school?
I did. I was always the musical director and the arranger all through school, not so much in high school, because by the time I was in high school, I realized I was deficient in theory. I had always studied private piano, and I wanted a good working vocabulary of orchestration and theory. So my parents enrolled me at Peabody Conservatory, and I did the entire 8 years of Peabody Conservatory Preparatory Division in 1 year. So I had no time between high school and studying my music. That was sort of not doing too many shows.
At what point did it seem like there could be a career?
I met, can you hear me?
Yes.
I met a very talented lyricist in Baltimore who was a teacher at the college I was planning to go to. And her name is Sarah Schlesinger. She's the head of the writing program for the NYU Musical Theater Division. And we decided we were going to produce some children's shows, things for family audiences, and she would write the lyrics and I would write the music. And that's when we started writing. And we did this for about 2 or 3 years. And we were doing a tri-state area tour. We were touring Delaware, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland. We were doing very, very well, winning all kinds of awards. The shows were being published, and they were also being performed by other theater companies. The Goodman did our Tom Sawyer. The Baum Feast did our Alice in Wonderland. They were really getting around. And she had read about the Lehman Engel BMI Musical Theater Workshop in New York. And we went up and auditioned. And we decided we were going to commute from Baltimore once a week and do the workshop. We did that, I think it was by the time I was in my 3rd year of college. But we were getting response to what we were writing.
Who was in the class with you?
When I was in BMI, the only one I really remember was Jeffrey Sweet and Brooks Morton. I remember there was nobody that really.
Oh, big.
No, no,
Murray,
big, no,
Murray
no big.
Yeston was around a long time, but probably after this.
Right. But I knew Maury, of course. Tommy Tune, when they were auditioning for Nine, decided not only did he want to hear a theater song, he wanted to hear an operatic aria from every lady that auditioned. And the casting director, Barry Moss, called me hysterically and he said, I know you don't want to play auditions, but you must come in and play the auditions for Nine. He's asking for an operatic aria and the piano players are having a nervous breakdown. So I did all the auditions for the original Broadway production at Nine because I had known Tommy from John Kenley. I mean, I had known him for a very long time. And it was very interesting, but I didn't know Maury. That's where I first met Maury. I didn't know Maury from the workshops. My musical that was showcased, and Lehman Engel, of course, was still the head of it then, was a musical version of Anne Frank with Victoria Mallory as Anne. And it was very, very well received. And I met with the original producer of Anne Frank, Kermit Bloomgarden, who assured me it could never be a musical. And that was the end of that.
It was a musical a couple of times off Broadway.
That's right.
But I didn't, on Broadway, it's a little trickier, I think.
Yes. You know, I left out, this is really, I think this is sort of interesting. When we were doing the children's shows back in Baltimore when I was in high school, we needed to find actors who were of a certain level, obviously not union, but kids that were a grade above the regular performers. And I had done shows at the Jewish Community Center, and I had taught at a couple performing arts schools and things. And we put together a really good company. Our company included Howard Ashman, who originally wanted to be an actor more than anything in the world. Actually, one of his goals was to play Peter Pan in Peter Pan. And we had another actor who did all our character roles named Danny Littman. Do you know that name?
No.
Danny won an Emmy for writing a TV movie called An Early Frost.
Well, a writer, I know a writer named that.
Yes, he created a TV project called Queer as Folk. It was quite successful. And we had Damon Evans, who became later Lionel on the Jeffersons. He was in our troupe. We had 5 or 6 really talented actors, and they stuck with us for years. It was a good little group.
Howard Ashman at that point had no lyric?
None at all. None at all. I remember he was writing a song called Save Voila. And I said, Howard, I speak French. That means it is, there are. You might like the way it sounds. It doesn't mean anything. and that was about it. My first Broadway show was Piaf, and Howard came to a performance and just thought he was so right to be in the show as an actor. And that was one of the last times I saw him. Although he did help us put 20 Fingers, 20 Toes, a musical I wrote by myself. I mean, I did the music and lyrics, and I co-wrote the book with Bob Nigro. We did that at the WPA, and Howard was one of the founders of the WPA Theater.
Did he get together with Alan Menken at the BMI workshop?
You know, I think that's where they met. You know, the workshop, I imagine in its earlier years, was really quite something, because Lehman Engel was a very interesting character. He was very funny, he was very sharp, he was very smart, but he was also extremely opinionated. And the opinions would change. He would see a show like Maggie Flynn, and he would say, there's nothing good in the show, but the stage is swept immaculately. The stagehands are doing an incredible job, and you have to appreciate it for that. And he would talk about company and explain why company doesn't really work as a musical. And then 2 weeks later, come back and tell us why it is perfection on every level. it's hard to assess things and make judgments quickly.
Was he the first? Was he the first one to talk about the "I Want" song?
Oh yes, the "I Want," the charm song, the comedy song, and he was one of the first people. I would always crack a joke or have something funny to say, and he kept telling me I should write my own lyrics. He said, what you do with your lyricist is very good, but he said, you're a smart aleck. And he said, smart alecks are good for musical theater. And that eventually came to pass. But I got along very well with Lehman. Very few arguments. He knew I wanted to write dance music, was even interested in working in the concert dance world as a composer. And he would always make me play my serious stuff. And he loved that. That he enjoyed. He was a very well-schooled musician.
How did you get together with Twyla Tharp?
Well, Twyla was interesting. I had always been a tremendous fan of her companies. I had seen everything she had done from the early 70s. And a very good friend of mine was a casting director. Her name was Mary Jo Slater, Christian's mother. And she was casting a musical version of a stage version of Singing in the Rain. And she called me one morning very early. It was like for a casting director to call somebody at 10:15 a.m., you knew there was an emergency. And she said they were looking at some people for the role of Don Lockwood in Singing in the Rain. And Twyla was asking the pianist to do things that he couldn't do. And she says, you need to come in here. We're only here for 3 hours. And I was on my, a streak that we all get. And I had been the musical director and the arranger for Piaf and Good with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I had done a number of other things. I had just written the score for The Glass Menagerie starring Jessica Tandy, directed by John Dexter. I didn't want to be playing auditions anymore. And she said, do this for me. Twyla Tharp is in the room. When she said Twyla Tharp, I was dressed and out of the apartment in 5 minutes. And I met her, and I played this audition, and she was asking me to do things. And she said to me at the end of the session, would you like to write the dance music? She said, I also have some film sequences that need to be scored, and I see you've done some film. And I said, I would love it. And I said, but how do you know I can do that? And she just, one of the very few compliments anyone has ever given me, said, if you can play like that, you can write dance music. And we became great buddies. I did many projects with her in the concert world as well. I wrote a ballet for her for ABT. I worked with her company, the Thorpe Company, and I wound up arranging and scoring The Times They Are Changing, which we did with Bob Dylan. And
have you seen the most recent Bob Dylan now?
I did. Not quite my style. I thought I appreciated it.
But some of you say that the story is really interesting.
Very interesting. It's a very interesting evening in theater. It's sort of like old theater. It just, I just don't know. His music is so iconic and so legendary. And even when we did The Times They Are Changing, and it was something Twyla was very aware of, is that when you take the songs out of Bob Dylan's performance methodology, you're changing what it is. There's something very different about Bob Dylan doing a Bob Dylan song than a great singer doing a Bob Dylan song. Because the vocal abilities are not judged. It's an authentic voice of and one of the great, most important people in music of the last 50 years.
So
we had a wonderful singer. I had the best we could get. We had Michael Arden And I mean, through thick and thin, Michael Arden always came through. I had Jen Colella in San Diego, and I mean, I couldn't have been more delighted with the people who did the show. I had the greatest band, and the band was spectacular. Everyone involved was so happy to be there. But once we left San Diego and started previewing in New York, and Twyla started changing the show because there were things that she didn't think that worked in San Diego would work in New York, you could feel the show sort of taking a different direction. It was, I mean, I spent a long time on that show. I was involved with that show in 2 workshops and 4 months in San Diego, and it was well over a year, and which is still fast for a Broadway show. But the one interesting thing about working with someone like Twyla Tharp is that it's always going to be Twyla Tharp's vision, and I can make as many suggestions as I want. She's going to do what she thinks is best for the property, and I think that's best. I don't think it should be by committee. You can make your suggestions, and it's her eye and it's her vision. Let her go with what she thinks is right. And we never really thought about that.
Did Bob Dylan give opinions as to how the show was going?
Bob Dylan watched one of the final rehearsals in San Diego, came and hugged me and said it was the best musical arrangements of his songs he had ever heard. He was absolutely delighted. And very few notes on this, very few. He was just totally, he understood what I was doing. I gave the show a very different musical texture. I wanted the songs to have a little bit of Copeland in them and to be not quite as raw. But, and we got one of Bob's players, one of his lead guitarists, to come and play the show. So there was an authenticity to it. But it was disappointing because after a while you do lose all objectivity, because it was a very, its head was in a dance piece that had songs. When she did Moving Out, there was no singing. The singing was all done by a man playing the piano. But she wanted the characters to sing. That's what she had learned from Moving Out, that the singing has got to come from the characters. It can't come from somebody singing for the characters. And it was really, I've written a great deal about it, and I am working on a book, and there's a huge chapter about the times they are changing.
Do you have a title for the?
I don't yet. I mean, it's maybe, you can never come back to the city again, but yeah, there's some great stories, but it was all very interesting. I worked with Twyla on a ballet, an American ballet theater called Everlast, and there were vocals in it because it was an homage to Jerome Kern, who was celebrating his 100th birthday. This was 1990, and what she did with the work was extraordinary. Her work with the narrative was the best work I think she had done with narrative, and the way she dealt with the singers on stage, not the ballet dancers, but we had 3 singers. We had Molly Wasserman, Jason Gra, and Judy Blazer as our singers. And again, it was working with a great artist. She hired Bill Brown to orchestrate it because there wasn't enough time for me to arrange it and orchestrate it. And when we read it, we had a read through of the score at Carnegie Hall. She came up to me and she had 2 words to say about the orchestration. She went, "We're dead." And I went, no, we can't be dead. Tell me what you don't like. And she made a list that was, 25 pages long. And I went downstairs into where the music was stored, and I went and fixed what she didn't like. And we were fine. And Bill was totally fine with that. But it's a different way of working. We always used to joke about it. Nothing is ever finished. It's always changing. And that might be a good way to work. I don't know.
So tell me about your being involved with Encore.
Oh, well, Encores was really funny. I didn't do much at Encores. I knew everyone over there. Jay Bender, who became a very good friend, actually even directed a few things I wrote. Uh, Jay asked me if from time to time he could call me to come in and play the principal auditions for the roles, not the chorus, not the dancers, just for the principal roles at Encores. And I said, if I was available, I'd love to. And I did that on and off for about 15 years. Eric Stern called me to play the piano part for Juno when they did the orchestra reading. And I did that on a few others as well. But I always got along great with Rob Fisher and Rob Berman. And I knew so many of those shows. It was funny. They did Golden Boy at one point, and Charles Strauss was one of my mentors. And Golden Boy was a musical I saw at a stage in my life where it still remains one of the 10 top experiences I had ever had in the theater. I mean, I just thought it was beautiful to look at, exciting to listen to, and not a bad score either. And when they did Golden Boy, they called me to coach Alfonso Ribeiro. And when I saw the finished product, I was jokingly said, it's not really Golden Boy. I mean, you're saying the words and you're singing the songs, but this isn't what it was. And that's the whole thing about theater. I don't think it's what's on the page. It's the elements that come together during production that make it what it is.
The thing is casting the most important thing?
I think casting is very important. I think casting is a very helpful thing for a director. I did work with Howard Davis on many of his productions. He hired me to do Piaf. We still joke that he hired me because I didn't have a resume with me. And I wrote my credentials on the bag that he had his lunch in. And he just thought that was hilarious. But Howard was one of the great directors in the English-speaking language. He was with the National and he was with the RSC. And he called me and he wanted me to rearrange Piaf for New York, which I gladly did. And then he called me to do Good. And then he called me to do Liaison Dangereuse. And he brought me in on The Iceman Cometh as well. And we're friends aside from that. And it was just incredible to sit and speak with him and just listen to where that mind was. And his approach is so different than anyone I had ever met. It was not intellectual, it was just intelligent. Very smart guy.
What encore things did you think worked best and what worked least well? My
Well,
least well was 70 Girls 70. That was
kind of that didn't come together. Again, it was putting together something with people of that age so quickly. I mean, there's really no time to really work.
Because everybody is 70 or up except for the boy, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, the one that I found disappointing was Lil Abner. Because Lil Abner, what was great about Lil Abner, Michael Kidd's dances and Michael Kidd's production, well, when you don't have those things, you're missing something. It's one of the integral elements of the show.
Because of the movie, couldn't they have recreated?
But no, you had Kathleen Marshall, who's a very talented choreographer, and she didn't want to do that. But she becomes very bound by having another person's dance music. I, for a very long time, had been a person who says, if you can't revive a show with the original choreographer, you don't want to revive the show. And then I met a very young director in Washington, D.C. named Alan Paul. He is with the Shakespeare Theater, Michael Kahn's theater in Washington. And he was doing a production of Man of La Mancha. And I didn't tell him of my association with La Mancha. And I watched him. They called me to play an audition because somebody didn't show up. And at the break, I told him, I really like the approach you're taking. I think there's a really interesting adjustments you're giving the actors and interesting points. if, down the pike, please let me know when the production opens because I'd like to see it. And I gave him my resume, and he called and he said, would you come down for a week before the opening and just tell me where I'm too far off the mark? I don't want to do what was there, but I don't want to go so far astray that it affects the proportions of the show. And I gladly did that. And the next year he was doing Kiss Me, Kate. And he said, I have Michelle Lynch choreographing Kiss Me, Kate. Michelle Lynch was a Jerry Mitchell associate during Hairspray, and she's a very creative choreographer. I had done dance music for her for Little House on the Prairie, which was toured for about a year. It never came into New York City, but it did have a full year's tour. And I told Michelle, I don't know what the original choreography of Kiss Me, Kate was. It was Hanya Holm. I know what Hanya Holm did. I'm sure it was lovely, but let's make you do the dances. You do what you want to do, and we'll match. And it was very, very successful. And but it wasn't the original. And then he did a production of Pajama Game at Arena Stage. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. And he was not going to use the Fosse choreography. And he asked me if I would write new dance music. And I said, I will write it if I can orchestrate it. But I also don't want to, if you're not using the Fosse ideas, you make your own scenarios for the dance. What do we want to do with the dance? A good choreographer named Parker Essie, who does a lot in Washington. And it wasn't bad. The only thing that really didn't work like bonkers was Steam Heat, because Steam Heat is a dance routine. It is certainly not about the song. It's about the movement. And for Camelot, I went in and wrote new incidental music. He had made some changes to the record. So I was working with a young director who had a very clear vision, was very respectful to the original material, knew exactly what he wanted to do with the productions. And I don't regret doing those things at all. I had a really, really good time. His last show right before COVID was a comedy of errors. And he asked me if I would write like 8 songs for the show. And he said, I can't do lyrics in a Shakespearean mode. He said, no. I'm setting the whole thing in 60s Greece, and write some musical comedy songs for me. And the songs went over like wildfire. To my surprise, I mean, I was shocked. It really went over great. So I keep meeting young choreographers and I keep meeting young directors. And while I couldn't do to a property like Oklahoma what was done in New York before COVID, I mean, I don't, that's not where I want to go with the properties. But I think adjustments and changes can be made, and a lot of times they won't improve what was originally there, but they can breathe some life into the show. But I still would never want to see Fiddler or West Side Story without the original choreography. I love the fact that they did West Side Story with new choreography, but I think when you're re-choreographing something of the artistic greatness of a Jerome Robbins, you have to come somewhat near the bar. You just can't put a dance in for the sake of, because there was a dance there, let's put a dance here. It's tricky. It's tricky business.
What about the use of film, that they were constantly filming as they were?
I think the use of film has not been fully realized yet. I think he had some really wonderful ideas. I just think, again, I think a lot of that was very exciting. It was also very annoying because the dimensions, I wasn't sure what I was watching. I mean, I found that it was an exciting 2 hours in the show, in the theater, but did I miss some things? I absolutely do. I mean, I did many West Side Stories, many, and I was in a room with Jerome Robbins for a week while he reconstructed it for Jerome Robbins Broadway. And when you're around that kind of genius, it only comes along once in a career. Rarely are you do you meet forces like that. It was the complete talent. They're just a remarkable person. Funny enough, I had heard in 1988 that Jerome Robbins was going to do a Broadway show reconstructing all of his famous numbers. And I had never worked with Jerome Robbins. I had worked with Donna McHale. I had worked with Twyla Tharp. I had worked with Kenny Ortega. I had worked, you name it, I had worked with them. And I really wanted to work on the show. And I called the Schubert office, and they told me Manny Eisenberg would be producing the show. Send a letter to Manny. And I did. And I got a call that Jerome Robbins would like me to come and play piano for him at his office at Lincoln Center. And what does he want to hear? Just bring yourself. He will give you something to sight read. So I went there, and when I got up to the floor his office was on, every pianist in New York City was waiting to come in. Everybody who had ever played a show, played a rehearsal, everybody was there. And I said, I can't believe at this stage of the game, I'm going to go and audition to be a rehearsal pianist for Jerome Robbins. And I went in, I asked him what he wanted to hear. He said, something from West Side. I said, the prologue, the rumble, the dance. So I played part of the rumble, I played part of the prologue. He said, do something from Fiddler. And I said, I'll do the bottle dance. And he said, let me get you the music. And when I know the music, I played it. And he started calling me in to do these work sessions with the 5 or 6 dance captains that he had assembled, which is Jerry Mitchell, Cynthia Rubia, an incredible group of people. And he started calling fairly regularly. And at that time, Twyla called and asked me if I was interested in doing a ballet for her for American Ballet Theater. And there I was. After going through all this, I knew I had to get out. So my lawyer at the time was Floria Lasky, who was also Jerome Robbins' attorney, one of the great legal minds for theater of forever. And I said, I've been playing some rehearsals for Jerry, and now I have to get out. And she just laughed. She said, tell him that Twyla Tharp called you to write a ballet for her. See how he responds. And he said to me, you've got to leave. You've got to leave. And he said, why are you here? And I said, I'm here because I grew up on your stuff, and I always wanted to work with you. And he says, you're not working with me. You're working for me. He says, you're a rehearsal pianist. He said, I don't know. I haven't chosen a conductor. Might you be on that list? He went, doubtful. But he said, I want to hear what you come up with for Twyla. That excites me. And I feel, all right, I'm glad I had the experience, and I got to know him, and I think fairly well. I have to tell you a funny story. Okay, so we're doing 20 Fingers, 20 Toes, and we have a week of previews, and we're at the WPA Theater, and it's the coldest winter I can ever remember. It's like 89, 90. And I'm upstairs screaming at somebody. The show is tremendously understaffed. There were lots of scene changes. The scene changes were taking 8 minutes, 9 minutes. The show was dying. This is in previews. And the first Saturday matinee comes, and I come downstairs from my rant, and the producer says, there's 2 men downstairs that want to talk to you. I said, tell them I'll meet them after the show. And they went, no, you really want to talk to these men. And I go downstairs, and waiting in the lobby were Jerome Robbins and Howard Davis. And honestly, I was going to refund the money to the audience. Personally, I was going to say the performance is canceled. And they got me upstairs, and they actually locked me in a dressing room to shut me up. And I spoke to him after the show, And it was very, very interesting. So I said, what did you think? And he goes, you never ask someone what they thought. If I want to volunteer a criticism, I will gladly tell you. Don't ask me what I thought. And I sort of joked, that good, huh? And he went, no, it's fine. And you're very, very funny. It's exhausting to watch. It's just exhausting to watch. And I said, but you stayed through both acts. That's something, right? He said, well, I just wanted to see if it was going to get better, you know. And but I mean, he was the kind of person. It must have been unbelievable to work on a new show with him because no stone went unturned. I mean, that eye was everywhere. He was just totally aware of everything that was happening every place. It was a unique experience. It was very unique.
So tell me about working with Martin Charnin.
Oh, Marty, one of the most likable people I had ever met. I had written a show called Swing Shift for 3 women. It was a boogie woogie opera. And we started it at a place called Theater by the Sea in New Hampshire. And it was very, very well received, primarily because it was all sung and all the rest of the tea was boogie woogie. It was interesting. The Manhattan Theater Club had heard about it. Lynn Meadow asked me about it. I gave her a tape of the production, an audio tape, and she said they wanted to do it as the closer of their season. And I was not happy with the director's work in New Hampshire. It was not all his fault, but there were problems, and the cast was very good. In New Hampshire, the 3 girls were Catherine Cox, Louisa Flanningham, and a girl who I had done one of the national tours of Greece with named Anne DeGare Martin. And they were all very, very good. When I told Lynn that I didn't want to continue with the particular director, she told me there's something called a 3-element clause where I can't use any 3 elements from his production. I can't use his set, his costumes. I can't use his 3 actors. So the only person I brought to New York was Anne Martin. And the other 2 girls in New York were Valerie Perry, who had played Evita in the Chicago company of Evita, and Maureen Moore, who quit the show after 2 weeks to replace the woman that was playing Constanza or in Amadeus. So we brought in Kay Cole. And the girls sang it beautifully. And I don't even remember who the director was that was assigned to the show. It was originally going to be Lynn Meadow herself, and then she had to pull out. And whoever it was did not understand anything with this much music. I mean, this thing was 2 hours of solid music. And I was very, very concerned. And I told Lynn, I want to replace the director. She says, then replace him. But I'm not going to get you a director. You have to find somebody. So I went, what have I liked in the last 10 years? And they said, I liked Annie. I thought Annie was very cleanly directed. So I called Martin. I introduced myself. And he said, look, I'll come and look at a run through. And then I'll decide whether I want to work on it. So he came to the Manhattan Theater Club, and we were about to start the run through. And I told him, I just want to preface this by saying, this is the worst thing you'll ever see in your life. And he went, thank you. And we ran the show. And when it was over, he called myself and my lyricist into the other room. And he said to me, first of all, I want to begin by saying, this is not the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. And my lyricist went, you see, you're overreacting. And he went, wait, it's one of the 5 worst things, but it is not the worst. And I laughed. And he said, I love it. We need to cut this down to 75 minutes. It's overwritten. It's not funny enough, but there's an awful lot of good work in here. And he managed in a period of less than a week to reassemble that show and turn it into something that played very, very well. It was never the show I had assumed it was going to be, but I was very, very happy with it. He ultimately wanted to adapt the musical and in true Martin Charnin fashion, turn it into a musical for 60 women working in a factory. And each scene would be a woman working on another part of a plane. And at the end of the show, the whole plane will be put together and fly off. And I went, kill me now. But we stayed close. We wrote some songs. We started writing songs together. And he was a big champion of me writing songs. He thought my lyrics were hilarious. And he wrote some comedy songs with me that we published with Hal Leonard. And we stayed friendly. I tried to get him involved in this baseball show we were doing for Peter Ledun and Nell Nugent, Steve Martin, and Troika. And unfortunately, the show was not coming together. And by the time Martin agreed he was going to come on board, he started having some health problems. And as you know, he passed away last summer. We were all just devastated by it. But a good friend. I could call him anytime and talk about anything. And he had learned to play a very good game. It's a game that I don't play. Martin knew how to schmooze everybody. I never saw the hysterical Martin Charnin. I never saw the mean Martin Charnin. He was just somebody you wanted to be around. He was exceptional.
How did you write with him? What was the process?
He would just write lyrics and hand them to me. And he would say, stretch it here, stretch it there, and I'll rework. And we were thinking about maybe a book musical. And he decided it was time to go old fashioned again. And I told him that doesn't particularly interest me, but I suggested The Bells of St. Mary's, Ingrid Bergman, Bing Crosby film.
Right.
I said, there's something there. There's something very moving about it to this day. I don't know whether it's the property or it's the performances, but she's certainly wonderful, and Bing Crosby is just a joy. And I said, I think this could be cut down, and I think there's something there. And I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks, and he called me and said, I was thinking old movies. I hear what you're saying about The Bells of St. Mary's, but the musical we want to write is Boys Town. No, it's not Boys Town. He went, yeah, it is Boys Town. And here's the reason. And he had 10 reasons that made absolute sense why Boys Town would work as a musical. The problem is when you hang up the phone and you're going, are you kidding? You can't do Boys Town as a musical. First of all, you need to have the town of boys. You need 80 kids to make it seem like there's a population there to tell the story. So but that's where Morty was. He would counter with his own ideas. And by the time you recountered and fought and discussed, let's not write a musical. We don't want to write a musical. It was an interesting way of working.
It was actually done at Cooperstown just before the pandemic?
Yes, the show was going to open at Cooperstown. They were actually building a facility there, and they were going to do it in the round. And it just never came together because the people writing it were not baseball aficionados. And not that the work they were doing wasn't professional. It was just not where the producers wanted the show to go. And I was all over them to stop, that something was wrong. The first reading went very, very well. The songs were cute. The songs were really cute. The sketches were not as successful, but they weren't bad. It was just the whole property wasn't landing. And it was a review. And for some reason, I assumed that Peter Ledun and Steve Martin had something to do with diamonds the Hal Prince thing about baseball. Because
That was a
they
case
gave
too.
me,
He went to people who had no interest in baseball, and they turned the songs into something very tangentially. It had a
yeah.
word
I
or
mean,
two.
they gave me a score. They gave me a musical score. And I went, what we're doing is not great, but it's miles ahead of this. I mean, I mean, but it was one of those things that was really nobody to talk to. Martin would have been the guy because Martin could have written it and he could have directed it. And as a director, he was a baseball maniac. I mean, it was funny because we often discussed The First, his musical about Jackie Robinson, which was, had book problems. I mean, the score wasn't where it should have been, but the book was not working on any level. And he would fight me about, there was a song in that show called The First. There was a title song. And I said, you have such passion, and there's no passion in this song. And he did not want to hear it. And he sang it for me 10 times in a row to tell me I was wrong. And I said, I just don't get it. I think it's professional. I think it's not embarrassing. It doesn't stir me. It's not like he wrote a song in Mata Hari called Maman, which came very close to being a hit song. And a bit of a Mama Look Short ripoff, but a very good song. And this moves me. The song, The First, does not move me. And he was not hearing it. It's
To me, the song from that I absolutely love is a song called "There Are Days."
There Are Days. It's the best song in the show. Oh, the man knew how to write a lyric. There's no question about it. I mean, he knew everything there was to know. He got on a kick sort of about right before Peter Stone passed away, and they had revised 2 by 2. And
it was done in Los Angeles, and then it was done.
Yes, and at Peter Stone's memorial, which was quite a memorial at the 46th Street Theater, Bill Clinton spoke. I mean, it was a mega memorial. Martin did a bit of the scene, and he sang one of the songs from 2 by 2. And we were all joking. We were saying, it's a memorial, Martin, not a backers audition. And he was going, no, you're wrong. He said, people will hear this and they will want to do this show. It would be an honor for Peter to have this show done. And of course, people were going, what in the hell was that all about? But he was so passionate about that show because he thought, tale out of school, he thought that the reason 2 by 2 failed, there were 2 reasons. He said, his lawyer called him and said, I've got good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first? He said, give me the good news. He went, you've got Danny Kaye. He signed for the show. All right, that's really good news. Give me the bad news. He went, you've got Danny Kaye. He signed for the show. So we knew there was going to be a Danny Kaye problem. The other thing was Joe Layton, at that time in his career, was buckling for a big hit. And he was going to do anything he could do to impose concept over content. And he said, what he made those actors do in 2 by 2, I wouldn't do to anyone. He said, they disassembled the set and they rebuilt the art. He said, all they did in the first act was take pieces of set and walk off the stage. And he said, it was Joe Layton. So I asked very politely, what do you think of the music? Lyrically, I think 2 by 2 is very, very good. I think some of the lyrics are actually excellent. He told me that 2 by 2 sounds like an old man was writing. And it wasn't that Richard Rodgers was at such an advanced age. I think it was partly disinterest in the project. But we never went any further in that. I always thought that I Remember Mama sounded like someone who was disinterested was writing the score. But that's and for a lot of reasons, because I'm obviously Richard Rodgers is, one of the shining lights in my musical life, and I adore Richard Rodgers' work. I just think later Richard Rodgers is nowhere near no strings Richard Rodgers. And why it is, I don't know. But
I think if you've been writing for 50 years, that eventually you come to the point you want it, you live for doing a new musical.
right,
That's your
absolutely.
reason for doing it. And you look around for the best musical you can find. And then you're sorry you picked that particular musical. I mean, do I hear a waltz?
But I hear a waltz. I mean, I saw the original production. I was a kid, but I saw the production. Herb Ross's work in Do I Hear a Waltz was stunning. The movement was wonderful, and the production, the Bernie Montressor sets were amazing. I mean, it was a beautiful production. Elizabeth Allen was terrific. Sergio Franchi was incredible. I mean, it had some high points.
See, to me, the end of the show is a downer. That you feel she has been tricked, and she's wasted her time and been made a fool of. Now, to me, in a musical comedy, I want something like, "Why did you come back next year, and we'll see how it goes."
Oh, yeah, interesting. That's valid, totally valid. I must tell you, Arthur Lawrence played around with it for a very long time, and he did a production at the George Street Playhouse.
I saw that, yes.
Penny Fuller called me, and she said, I have to go in and audition for Arthur for Do I Hear a Waltz? And we worked the songs together. And, Penny is a remarkable artist. I mean, what Penny does, a lot of people can't do. I mean, she acts a song, and she delivers on the vocal element as well. She came in and sang 2 songs for Arthur, and he says, I want you to stay around and read. And she came in and read, and he talked to her for a little bit, and he said to her, there is no one around that does what you do. He said, it's a complete experience. And he was taken with her, and he hired her to do the production. And I saw it, and it was, it was all over the map. I just always wonder about that show. I saw it at City Center Encores, and Melissa Errico was lovely. And the cast was very, very good. But it didn't have a tenth of the presence it did when I saw it in the theater. And I don't know why that is.
See, I also saw it with Dorothy Collins.
Well, she would have been wonderful.
I did not like Elizabeth Allen. I'm sorry, I did not like Elizabeth Allen. I didn't really care about her.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with some of the old world performers. I did a lot of stuff with John Raitt, and I scored John Raitt's symphonic concerts that he did towards the end of his life, and I played the big concert with him when he did they named the theater at Pepperdine, the John Raitt Theater, and he went out on a small concert tour with Anna Marie Alberghetti, and Anna Marie Alberghetti, I mean, still was singing great, looked wonderful. And all she talked about was how they could still do a revival of Carnival with her playing Lily if they put the critics far enough back in the house. I mean, these people get so attached to the property. I mean, all John talked about for the last 2 years that I worked with him was he was going to revive a musical called Magdalena. He said, Magdalena deserves to be seen. I'd
had a copy and was so about it, but I said, I haven't heard it in years. I became very friendly with Wright and Forrest. And I said, I can't find my copy. I'm going to buy a copy on Amazon. So I'm almost done.
Oh, I mean, he played me, he carried some of the stuff around, and he just totally believed in. He used to do in his concerts a song from Three Wishes for Jamie called My Heart's Darling. And he assured me it was the best song he ever sang in a theatrical production. I went, John, the soliloquy. Hey there.
Yes,
He went,
yes, yes.
nope, nope, you're wrong. He said, my heart's darling means something. And I couldn't change his mind.
And the show ran what, for 2 months or something like that?
Yeah. And there, I had a complete score. I gave it to someone, a collector. I didn't, I never looked at it. He was at this concert he did at Pepperdine. There's a little party afterwards, and at his table was Ruben Mamoulian, the original director of Carousel, Oklahoma, and Porgy and Bess.
How old would he have been?
He was much older. This was 1984, but he was very old. Still lucid though. I talked with him a great deal.
Okay.
Ruben Mamoulian, I can't remember. Jan Clayton, the original Julie Jordan. Benet Venuto was there, and assorted friends and family. Bonnie Raitt, so I'm seated at the table and I'm talking to Ruben Mamoulian, and he is just talking under his breath, making comments. And he went, he still does that in the soliloquy. He said it's 45 years later and he's still doing that thing he does in the soliloquy. I mean, these guys were just, they're from another world. It was a different way of working. It must have been incredible. I'm jealous.
Are you familiar with Love Me Tonight with Jeanette MacDonald?
I am, yes.
That opening sequence, that's one of the most brilliant things ever.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's
that's Ruben Mamoulian. He takes this thing. It's 25 minutes where it's a marching band. That's
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, these guys were just unbelievable. I have to stick this in. When I was working with Twyla at ABT, the way ballet companies work is they rehearse the entire repertory in the course of a day. They spend 1 hour with Twyla, 1 hour with Mark Morris, 1 hour with Baryshnikov, 1 hour with Agnes DeMille. Each choreographer is given an hour or 2 hours to work on different parts of the ballet. And I was working with Twyla for maybe an hour here or an hour there, and I was stuck there doing nothing. And Agnes used to use a pianist whose name was Martha Johnson. Wonderful, wonderful pianist. She was a rehearsal pianist on shows like Mr. President. I mean, one of the really great rehearsal pianists. And she had become a staple, one of the grandmaster pianists at American Ballet Theater. And Agnes was doing a ballet. Miss DeMille was doing a ballet called The Informer, which was based on the dance music from Juno. She had turned it into a narrative ballet. And it was very interesting, but she needed some additional music. So she had Martha Johnson adapt this one slow movement into something called the keening sequence, and it wasn't working. And Agnes was watching me at a rehearsal with Twyla, and she came up to me and she said, would you come in and just sit with Martha and make some suggestions? She said, the music is not moving. It's sitting there like a lox, and I need it to move. So I sat with Martha and got along great. And I told her I would do this, I would do that, just made circle little things. And I started a correspondence with Agnes DeMille. And I asked her many, many questions. And at the time, this is circa 1990, I asked her how she thought about shows being revived in New York City without the original choreography. And she said, such as? And I said, well, they're about to do 110 in the Shade at New York City Opera, at the State Theater. And they have hired a choreographer who's not planning to restore your work. And she said to me, darling, no one should have to sit through that in any form, let alone the original form. She wasn't a huge fan. And then she went on this tirade about Harvey, the composer, Harvey Schmidt. And she said, I thought he was a very talented composer. In 110 in the Shade, they hired a very good dance arranger named Billy Goldenberg. And Billy wrote all the dance music to sound like Aaron Copland. So I told Billy, if I want Aaron, I'll call Aaron. He wrote Rodeo for me. I don't need you imitating Aaron. She said it was not a pleasant experience for me. Then she told me why Carousel could never be done without her choreography. Now, at the time, and I'll show you one of these letters because you'll find them fascinating. At the time, it makes perfect sense. Of course, we've seen several carousels now without her choreography. And she basically said that the dramaturgy of the ballet in the second act, Louise on the beach, was her idea. And what it's saying is it's a very important part of the narrative of the text. And so in a sense, her choreography is a part of the copywritten narrative. And I do agree with that, because I've never seen a second act ballet in Carousel that is as satisfying as DeMille's ballet. It's old fashioned, it's mannered, but it's great.
What was her thought about Juno?
She said the problem with Juno was they actually made West Side Story vacate the theater because they thought they were going to be the next hit. And she said everybody was too concerned about being better than West Side Story than working on the show and what wasn't working. She found Shirley Booth gifted, but a little cold for the role. And she thought Tommy Raw was a genius of the first order. And she said the dances were magnificent. And the stuff that was in the ballet that she did for ABT, The Informer, is not great choreography. It's very good DeMille. It gives you a sense of maybe where she was at that time in her career. I mean, some of her stuff is just dazzling. But it is of a certain time and a certain place. But I no more so than the music and lyrics are of a certain time and a certain place. I mean, you could discuss this for years. I mean, really, has there ever been a better opening than the prologue in West Side Story? Is anyone really going to reinvent, if you're using that music, is anyone going to reinvent anything that surpasses what was accomplished? I think not.
But I do think that I just missed coming to New York by a couple of years, so I did not see Juno.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. The encore.
Yeah,
I believe
the
encore could not have been as successful as a fully rehearsed Broadway.
No, yeah.
So I think that's, I mean, I am moved to tears with that, just listening to the music. So imagine the greatest choreography on top of that. I think, well, that's all you need.
Exactly. That's exactly how I thought.
$4.90 or something like that. You earned. You don't need to earn anymore. That should be it. I've done 10 minutes of the greatest.
Right, and she was not bitter towards the end. She was angry. She was very angry. She thought she was mistreated badly by Rodgers and Hammerstein. They ultimately kicked in a small royalty that they paid her with the licensing of the shows. And she was just bitter that her last show Come Summer.
Yes.
And I saw Come Summer, and Come Summer was like something from another time and place. It had nothing to do with anything, although some of the movement was beautiful. And I don't know, I didn't see Kwamina.
I
But I heard her work in Quamino was dazzling.
would love to have seen that. Yes, yes.
And I mean, I didn't see Gentlemen Prefer Blondes either, and they say her work in that was spectacular. And I mean, she certainly had a mega career. Her ballet, which is still in the repertory of a number of companies, Fall River Legend, which is the Lizzie Borden story, I think is one of the 5 greatest narrative ballets ever staged. And to this day, I run and buy a ticket whenever they're doing it. It just really creatively and artistically does something for me. She speaks to me directly. It's amazing.
Is there any chance that City Center is going to come back and do Love Life eventually? They've
I don't know.
abandoned.
They're talking about it.
It's not as relevant. Everything has to be more relevant.
Yeah, which is kind of sad. I mean, I mean, you can cut I Feel Pretty from West Side Story. That's your prerogative. You can get permission from the estate. But, I told you I did a number of works with Howard Davis. Howard Davis was hired to do My Fair Lady, a Broadway revival. And this is the one with Richard Chamberlain and Melissa Errico. And Howard called me and said, do you want to do My Fair Lady? I went, oh my goodness, My Fair Lady with you directing? I really want to do it. And I called my lawyer and she said to me, here's the reason why you can't do My Fair Lady with Howard Davis. Because the estate will not give you permission to change one note. And he is going to be unhappy with everything that he deals with in that particular show. And he's going to tell you to change it. And you're going to be obligated to change it. And the estate is going to tell you no. And you're going to get on a 1-to-1 with him. And the two of you will never talk again. So I didn't do My Fair Lady. I didn't work on My Fair Lady. And I think I came in and played some of the auditions for him, some of the principal auditions. And, but I had seen his production in London of Pygmalion with Alan Howard, who was our star in the show Good. And it was as good as My Fair Lady. It really was. Pygmalion is a pretty amazing play. You don't get the extra treats that the musical gives you. But it was remarkable. His My Fair Lady was not what I thought it was going to be. It was not satisfying from top to bottom.
They had flying in it. I thought that was interesting.
Yes, they like a Magritte painting for the. He also put the ballet. He put the ball, which is at the end of the first act, to the beginning of the second act. So the first act ended with Eliza dressed in her finery going to the ball, curtain. The second act opened with the ensemble waltzing at the ball. And we were going back to our seats. I was with Liz McCann. You know Liz?
Yes.
I was with Liz McCann and Howard Davis and myself. We're walking back to our seats. And we were about halfway down the orchestra section, and the lights went out, and the curtain went up, and the second act was starting. And Howard said, the front of house is not in contact with the back of house, and half the audience is not seated, and they're missing the ball. And Liz McCann just turned to him, and she said, if you would have left it where it was supposed to have been, they wouldn't have missed it. And we just roared. The three of us just roared. But, who knows? I asked him, you might be able to answer. So I asked him, if you move the ball to the second act, after you have the end of the ball scene, you have a scene with a song called You Did It, in which Higgins and his associate recap everything that's happened at the ball. I said, the reason that song is there is to remind the audience what went on at the end of the first act. And he said, that's why I hate that song. And we were just like, but I mean, this stuff is, you play around with this stuff and it's going to bite you. It really is. Those guys, no matter what you think about Moss Hart and Alan J. Lerner, they really knew what they were doing. They did have a certain skill, and things that that's what I always say to young directors: find out what was there, understand why it's there. If it doesn't work, figure out why it doesn't work, but understand why everything is there for a reason. Things weren't just thrown to fate. They are there for a reason.
You know, there's a wonderful book, 2 books about Alan J. Lerner. One is basically letters, basically from him, but sometimes to him.
Right.
And then a summation of his career. And for My Fair Lady, numerous people tried to write My Fair Lady, and they worked on it for a while and said, we can't make it into a musical. And then I think it was that what is the relationship between Eliza and Higgins? You have to have some idea of what it is. And they wrote numerous songs. It'd be a humor, how come we haven't, gotten together kind of song. But ultimately what they wound up with, they thought did work. And,
Yeah, I mean, it's even in shows that failed. I would always ask Mitch Lee about Cry for Us All. And that hurt him badly. That show did not work. And there's some terrific music in it, really, really good stuff. And he said, I don't want to talk about it. I said, maybe let's do a 1 week workshop and let's look at it. And he said, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money on Cry for Us All. We don't need to look at it anymore. He said, when I miss it, I can listen to the record. And that was it. But I don't know. Mitch really fancied himself a director. He took directorial credit for The King and I with Yul Brynner, the revival. And he liked the immediacy of talking to the actors, talking to the musicians. He liked that much, much more than he did writing music.
To me, he, with a few exceptions, worked with people who were not experienced or overly talented with the lyrics and the book.
Right.
I think that comes from standing, I'm the big guy. You've done nothing. Literally, you've done nothing. You can never question me because I wrote La Mancha.
That's right. But Albie Marr, who was married to Joan Diener, Albie Marr had done the original Chalk Garden, and he had done the original Milk and Honey, and he had done the original Kismet. So he was he was a fairly established director. What happened with Albie was they made a great deal of money on Man of La Mancha, and his wife was involved in the production, and it became a thing of centering productions around Joan, who was very talented. I did a production in Scranton, Pennsylvania for a week that we opened without any rehearsal. And he told me 6 of the muleteers we're going to use were in the original show. And he did. He was terribly loyal to everybody. And it wasn't the best thing for the show, but he could put that show together in a matter of minutes. If you rehearsed it, fine. If you didn't rehearse it, that was fine too. And, it's Man of La Mancha. They're coming to see Man of La Mancha. They're going to love it. And, I've never had one like that, but it must be nice.
Why was there never a recording of the Jenny Easton Raul Julia version?
I don't know what went on there. And Sheena was not a bad singer. I mean, it was an A+ pop voice, and she really didn't sound bad in the songs. I mean, some of the songs were actually quite good. I mean, it was the questionable thing was she had a little bit of a brogue in her voice, and she's playing Aldonza. And it was really funny during one of the rehearsals. Raul Julia they were doing the song Dulcinea, and he decided it was Castilian and it should be pronounced Dulcinea. And I can't sing the song like that because people will laugh when I sing Dulcinea. They're going to really go Dulcinea. And she just looked at him and he went, "Shut up and learn your fucking lines." And I just fell on the floor. I mean, he came from one place, she came from another place. Mitch is there smiling. Albie is telling us about Richard Kiley and Robert Roundsville. I mean, it was like a cross section of worlds. I mean, there was apparently, I sat with Richard Kiley at the opening night of the Howard Davis My Fair Lady. I was seated at his table, and I had just gotten back from Scranton conducting Man of La Mancha with Joan Diener. And I told him I had just done La Mancha, and Richard Kiley was laughing. He went, "She's still playing Aldonza?" Anyway, she was, and she was great. I mean, it was great fun for me. And Richard Kiley was telling me that, and this is stuff I've never seen. There's all this stuff, parts of La Mancha that people have never seen. There was a black mass, and there was this thing with these sexually deviant friars, and there were all these sequences. And Richard Kiley went up to Albie Moore and Dale Wasserman, and they said, "This stuff goes or we go." And he said it was the only time they ever made those demands because people thought, I mean, that show was not, no one was waiting for that show in New York. People were sort of giggling about it, but they always thought, those producers, Selden and James, thought that was going to be the hit of hits. And they were right.
I didn't see it at Goodspeed. When I came to New York, I wanted to see everything, but having a car was not practical.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, that's in no man's land, right? Yeah.
But then once I moved back to Connecticut for other reasons, I said, I'm getting a car and I'm going to see shows at Goodspeed in Philadelphia and things like that. So I saw the world premiere. A year earlier, I would have been at Goodspeed and I would have told you what I thought of what I'm guessing. It was a different show then. And then they moved it to this strange new place in the middle of Greenwich Village.
Yeah. Built a little shack for it, and there it lives.
Yeah, I had heard bad things about it. I don't know where. But,
yeah. No,
I went on a snowy evening, and it was really snowing by the time I got there. And there were no reduced prices in those days. Yeah. There was used to a reduced price. And I said, I'm not paying $10 to see this show. So I said, I'm going to get the cheapest seat they have, and then I'll move down. I know there won't be many people. And there weren't. As well, at what point do I move down? Do I move down before the show starts? So I'm debating that. And somebody announces that Richard Kiley was not going to be able to sing and act that evening.
Oh, gosh.
And I thought, okay, they certainly cannot question my getting a better seat. Otherwise, I'll say, I want my money back. So I made the mistake of going where there was no one sitting at all. So obviously, ushers were warned that that nobody should be seating in that. So they came up to me and said, "Can I see your ticket?" I said, "My ticket is way up there." And I said, "I'm not being given a complete performance this evening. And if you don't, I'll get my money back." And she said, "Well, I just know what I've been told. Let me talk to the head usher." So the head usher comes and she said, "Why don't you just get your money back?" So I go, "Okay, I'll get my money back and I'll come and see it right after it opens." And then it opens to rave reviews.
Oh, yes.
I could not get a ticket.
That's amazing. Yeah,
I wound up seeing it. I had an ex-girlfriend. I'm about to be married. And an ex-girlfriend calls me. She said, "Bruce, she never wanted to go to the theater, ever. And all women wanted to go is to the movies." I said, "It's New York. You could live in Scranton or Milwaukee." So she said, well, I would like to see Man of La Mancha. And I said, well, I'm going to be married. She said, well, that's all right. And so I was intrigued that she said, I wanted to go to the theater. So I saw the production, but Richard did not do the matinees.
Oh gosh.
So I saw Ray Middleton, I think.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I had seen a production travel through Baltimore when I was in college with Jose Ferrer playing Quixote. And it was a wonderful woman, a lady named Maura K. Wedge, who had also done a revival of Oliver. It was probably one of the best Aldonzas I had ever seen. You know what I wanted to tell you really quickly is I told you I did a lot of workshops and readings, and we did a workshop of Pal Joey, the Richard Greenberg rewrite. And we put it together very quickly. But you were talking about casts making a show. In this particular production, we had Donna Murphy as Vera, Laura Benanti as Linda, Faith Prince as Gladys, Katie Finneran is Melba, and John Stamos is Joey. Now this thing, the audience was hysterical. I mean, I thought this is an absolute go. And I was the musical director, and I went, I can't believe this isn't going to go. And it was produced by the Weislers, this reading. And no, that was not the way they went. They went a completely different way, in the roundabout did the production and just totally missed the mark. But this was without any dancing, just the singing and the book. And you would have thought you were watching, the original cast. I mean, it was absolutely stunning. I did a workshop of a show called Triumph of Love, written by a young composer named Jeffrey Stock. And Jeffrey and I became very good friends. And I convinced, this was produced by Roundabout as well. And I convinced him that what he wanted me to do, he said, you want me to sit with you in the afternoons while they're rehearsing, and let's restructure the songs. Let's make them a little more show busy. It's a little art songy right now. And we can, and we did, and we became really good friends. And we had Melissa Errico was starring in that particular workshop. And I said, you know what we should do is we should do a big workshop, The Sound of Music. It hasn't been done on Broadway in quite some time. And we did a reading, and that one was optioned before the first act was over. But it was optioned by Jujamson. And we were told then and there that the director was going to be Susan Schulman. And I've worked with Susan before, and I love Susan. It's just, that's not what I wanted to do with The Sound of Music. So it becomes really tricky, but I think you can pull the wool over anyone's eyes if you get the right people when you're trying to sell it. Particularly in this revival world. I don't know, is there anything left to revive? Is there anything anybody wants to see?
Carmen, all the big shows that I didn't get to see.
Yeah, right. Cry for us all.
Yes, I saw the world premiere was in that one. I want to see the world premiere. I want to see the first time, because they're always cut songs, right? You go to the first performance, there's always something cut. So it was the Schubert in New Haven, and Minnie's Boys was premiering the same night in New York. So I said, gee, I'd like to see both of them. So it was bad snow, and I said, well, it's closer to New Haven from where I am in Wilton, Connecticut, than to drive into the city. It's like half an hour closer.
Right.
So I will go and see the Cry for a Song, and then for the second performance, the next day I will go and see Minnie's Boys. And Minnie's Boys, again, Shelley Winters. The whole thing is, she looked like Groucho's mother, the Groucho. We don't care, Groucho. We don't care.
Yeah. Oh, really? I saw it. I saw a preview in New York. This when I first moved to the city. I have to tell you, there are so many shows that we saw, and I can't even. I've got the playbills and everything, and you go back and look at them and go, I don't remember anything about this. I mean, I saw Her First Roman, and I saw The Ambassadors, and I couldn't tell you anything about them.
Well, I have like one impression. I mean, the ambassadors, very boring story. We don't care.
Right. Yeah.
A legal issue, who cares? We do not care about that. And there's
Yeah.
a wonderful, again, things sound better today than they did when we first saw them because we're used to not so good stuff today. So
Yeah.
that, all of my life, you hear that and say, my God, that's a great song.
Yeah.
Didn't seem that great in the show because he just sings it. But you listen to the song and sing it. But it was set up so we cared, that would have
Yeah.
been a
Yeah.
lot more meaningful.
I remember playing rehearsals for a show called Musical Chairs.
So that I did the recording of that.
Yeah,
I didn't
it
mean to.
yeah, and I do remember that Susan Stroman was in the ensemble and Scott Ellis was in the ensemble.
But she was the ingenue. They were looking for Sally.
Yeah, she came out at the very end. The very end. That's correct. That's correct. And but I remember, I worked on zillions of shows, and I met Joe Layton. I was introduced to Ron Field and Joe Layton, all for me to hear my dance music. And Joe Layton said, I want you to come and play the dance auditions for Bring Back Birdie, because you're very hip and you know pop music. And I would come in and just play the dance auditions and leave. And I just thought Joe Layton was the greatest. I just thought he, I said, when
the concept, we had all the televisions, bad concept.
Oh, terrible, right, terrible. Oh, that was just particularly awful. I did the Today Show one morning with Donald O'Connor, and all he did was talk about that show, and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. And then he said to me, "You did Singing in the Rain, right?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Who in their right mind would think you can do Singing in the Rain 8 times a week?" He said, "Those numbers were meant to be staged, filmed, and forgotten." It was really interesting. Everybody, approaches it from their own view, from their own perspective. Look,
Have you ever seen it in London? I have not.
No.
But it seems to be a different approach.
Right. Well, originally it was done in London and with the same musical director, Stanley Lebowski, and the same orchestrator. And Twyla was brought into the show. And Twyla's idea was to do Singing in the Rain with a very 20s kind of take on it, with everything designed in black and white, and with the music to have like a hot early 30s, late 20s sound to get away from the MGM musical. And that's why I was brought in to write new dance music. And it still wound up gravitating back to the MGM version of the show. But that would have been somewhat interesting.
Did you see Bye Bye Birdie?
Bring back.
Back.
Absolutely. It was horrifying.
I swear the score is a good score.
Oh, he's incapable of writing a bad score.
Some of the really recent stuff. I mean, he's 95 years old. He's written so much that's good. So much that's good.
It's so good, and he studied with Nadia Boulanger, and he's a very knowledgeable musician.
He started as a dance arranger.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't like to do anything that was too technical. He said his transposition skills were really good. I was telling him that Dom Pippin, the conductor, said to me once, "You have got to stop playing the piano." He said, "When they hear you play the piano, that's all they're going to hire you to do is play the piano." And I said, "But I love playing the piano." Anyway, get over it. And to this day, I make myself somewhat available as a pianist, but not to the degree that I used to. I mean, I'm really not playing auditions. I'll work with singers more in Hollywood than I do here in New York, but they'll make me a consultant on a film. But those were the good old days. And I was going to tell you, when I was still in Baltimore, we saw a show tryout at the Mechanic Theater called In Someone Else's Sandals,
Yes,
which became a show called I'm Solomon.
yes, it started. I saw it in New Haven. This is again just in time for me to see the New Haven. And
And
originally, it had lyrics by the guy who wrote Love Story.
Eric Siegel.
Yes, and a
Yes, I think that's
professor, and he also did Odyssey, which of course
yes,
turned into Home Sweet Home.
right. Yes,
And
absolutely.
he left those shows, and I'm sure he's glad his name was not on the Broadway productions. But
Well, we went and saw, we went on like a Saturday night to see In Someone Else's Sandals. And this was, we didn't know because I had been in school and we had dinner. It was the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And we went through the first act. The audience was so small and very quiet. And at the beginning of the second act, they started the show. And in the middle of the scene, while they were still playing the scene, it was Dick Shawn and somebody else. This management person came out and said, ladies and gentlemen, the city is under martial law. Go directly to your cars and go home. And we left. And I always wanted to go back, but the show never reopened there. They went right back to New York. But that was in, we saw shows like Ari, which was the musical version of Exodus.
yes,
And we saw
terrible,
these
terrible.
terrible. One was, but Martin Charnin said to me, always look and find something good. See if you can connect with the idea that somebody thought this would be a good musical. And he says, you'll enjoy it more. Don't go in to criticize, go in there to support, and you don't have to love it, but find out what made them gravitate towards that particular piece of material. I think that's great advice.
So I saw the world premiere of Ari in Philadelphia. And then I went off to London to see some shows. I came back, Ari was opening. And I called somebody, I said, has it gotten any better? He said, oh, no. So I said, well, I hated it in Philadelphia. I always did love to see first and close to last. I said, oh, I will not go to see it. So I get a program over from somebody, and I see a song is written by someone I never heard of, the music and lyrics. Of course, it's Leon Uris writing lyrics, who's never written a lyric. And the music is by a guy who played cocktail piano at a ski lodge in Colorado.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's.
So I said, what's this song written by Joe Pula? And he said, he's an investor. And he said, it's that kind of a show. We just have a show. You're going to lose all your money, but yeah, we'll do one of your songs.
Oh, that's hilarious. But it's still, when I started doing films and I did Elf and Analyze That and Meet the Parents, and I wrote a musical arena show based on Garfield. I wrote it with Jim Davis, and I've touched on everything. And I still think what was great about New York City was when you move to New York to be in the theater, it's accessible. You feel like you're close to it, that there's a way to get in. Hollywood, you don't feel that way. You have to be introduced to Hollywood. Someone has to come to you. There's no doors to knock on. Here, there are always doors to knock on.
You, as an actor, you can be cast your first day in New York.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're not getting a starring part in Hollywood the first day you come in.
I could never call Jerome Robbins Jerry. I used to just jokingly call him Mr. Robbins, and I couldn't call him Jerry. He was too high on the food chain for me. I would certainly never call Agnes DeMille Agnes. It was always Miss DeMille. Twyla, I called Twyla because we had been through a lot together, and it's more of a working relationship. But there's certain people you meet. I felt kind of silly calling John Raitt John, or calling Joan Dieter Joan. It didn't fly for me. But you begin to see that you're running around in these circles for your talent. They admire what you do, and they're very respectful of it. But it's such an incredible business because you just never know what turn it's going to take, or where you're going to go. When we wrote 20 Fingers, 20 Toes, and it was a musical about the Hilton sisters, and it was off Broadway by 89, 90, and people came out with the criticism that what this musical is basically doing is making fun of a birth defect. Now, I never assumed Siamese twins to be like a birth defect. And that certainly wasn't the intention. But we could not, some people came in and took us to such task for that particular slant. And several years ago, several years later, they did Sideshow, which took a very serious approach to the same subject matter. I took a very silly approach to it. And Sideshow failed on its own reasons. And when Sideshow was revived, they actually went back to things in the book that were in the book of 20 Fingers, 20 Toes, because I based 20 Fingers, 20 Toes on the original story of the Hilton sisters. And it didn't work a second time. And you wonder, maybe certain things should not be touched. Maybe we should just not deal with them.
The story with the two guys in their lives, that they're both conniving and liars, and
yeah.
Even if that's true, I don't want to know that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. There has to be something. It has to be something that ultimately connects with the people that are watching it. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, you never know. I mean, when I remember hearing there's a musical version of Don Quixote, and we all laughed. Oh, that ought to be a gem, and there you go. You just never know. You never know what could be more far afield than a musical version of the life of Alexander Hamilton. I mean, you just never know.
Well, what
I did ask, I just real quickly, that I asked Cy Coleman once. They were doing a revival of Sweet Charity without the Fosse choreography. This was the one that was done at the Martin Beck. A television star played Charity. Walter Bobby directed it.
Oh yeah,
Applegate. Christine Applegate. And I said to Cy, just out of curiosity, because Cy knew me as an orchestrator and an arranger, and I said, just out of curiosity, if by some stroke of wonderful fortune, I would have had the opportunity to have Bob Fosse choreograph a show I wrote, why would you want it to be seen without his work? Because the high points of Sweet Charity are certainly not in the book, And he said to me, people have said that to me before, and he said, I think you can't date a show by its original production. And they think they have a way of doing the show to make it come to life again. And I'm going with it. And I just thought that was really interesting, because I mean, when I think of Sweet Charity and I think of seeing the original show in previews, and there is not a moment in that show that I don't use the word Fosse in the same breath. It's very interesting. I don't really have to see Sweet Charity without Fosse's contribution. And I could name a dozen other shows like that. And to each their own,
What do you see for the future of Broadway?
I don't know. This is a very scary time right now. I don't know. I think there will always be an audience to see a live show. I think it's anybody's guess right now. I just don't know. I personally, I'm writing a little 3-character thing called Better Than Ever. And I just wrote a little musical that's licensed and published by a Concord Theatrical based on Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm back to writing very small, 3 and 4 characters. And I can do what I have to do with smaller forces. I would still, I still think it would be interesting to find a really great visionary young choreographer like Larry Keigwin, who just did an amazing piece for Paul Taylor's company, and do a dance piece with somebody like that. I think I would really enjoy that tremendously. I think the movement thing can still be explored.
What did you think of American in Paris on stage?
I just thought it was fine. I just thought it was a little on the boring side. I mean, I thought the film, even when you see the film today, it is just so cinematically, ravishingly beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing to look at. I never found the show to be that beautiful, and I don't think there's that much to invest in the book of American in Paris. Look, I did one of the Titanic failures of all times, Dance of the Vampires. I was brought in the day before rehearsal started to write new dance music for them. And Dance of the Vampires has been quite a success in Germany at the time. And these producers thought to get rid of the book and commission a new book by David Ives, who is a first-rate playwright, and star Michael Crawford in the lead instead of going with a real thrilling rock voice. And I've done films with John Carafa, and I've done shows with John Carafa. And there's a brilliant young character actor in the show named Mark Price, who is just as good as it gets. And no one can get over the feeling. There was this feeling in the room from the meet and greet of doom. You know that feeling of doom? What are we doing here? And Jim Steinman, who I have worked for before, rock composer, producer, and Jim Steinman, from the word go, was unhappy with the treatment, the revisionist treatment that the piece was getting. And it was beautifully produced. And I mean, the costumes, the sets, the orchestra, everything was really first class about it, but nobody did anything. I mean, you just watched the show crumble in front of your very eyes. And you know, John Rando was an excellent director. He was terribly stressed at the time. His mother had just died, and it was a really the right property for John. I'm not sure whether this was the penultimate David Ives libretto. And Jim Steinman's music is very, very good. He is a first-rate composer, not a first-rate lyricist, but and there was so much dancing in it. One dance, I'll never forget, the first dance in Act 1 came in at something like 600 bars of music. It's like Swan Lake. I mean, there was so much music in the show. And that's the first one I had been involved with where I didn't have any ideas about what to do. Just something was not right about the whole evening. And then, of course, the creative control moved over to Crawford. And if anyone else was getting a laugh or any kind of response, it would be gone in the next performance. So it was, but that was one of the, Singing in the Rain, which a great deal of Singing in the Rain wasn't working. They did manage to fix a great deal of it. I mean, it was passable, but I had no ideas for Dance of the Vampires, none. And I changed, reformatted a couple of the vocal things to make, instead of everything going for a solid ending, to make exit music, to make people start moving, to just get it out of its body. And I wrote a new dance for the Garlic song, and I wrote a big dance. I didn't remember even how much was left in for the conclusion of the show. But it's another show. I mean, I would like to see somebody taking a stab at that again sometime on a much smaller level.
But it did succeed in a more serious version all over Europe, right?
All over Europe, tremendously. I mean, we're talking about multi-year runs. And
equivalent of Phantom and shows like
right,
that.
Right. And
So why not just do that version, not the David Ives version?
Right. And Michael Crawford is a gifted actor. he sings, his acting is fantastic. His comedy acting is brilliant. I mean, nothing connected. It was one of those shows where you just, oh, I remember just sitting in the audience and going, kill me now. Just let this thing end. It just wouldn't, it just rambled and rambled and rambled. And that high point, that one number that I thought could fix the show never came. Simon wrote a comedy song which didn't have a laugh in it. And it was 28 pages long. And they taught it to the company one day, and everybody just looked at each other. And even he said, this is not going to work. But I know there was such animosity going between each desperate force in the production that, I just felt bad for everybody because it cost so much money. And the producers were incredible. I mean, they gave it every opportunity. They truly did. That's showbiz.
Well, again, it's been a wonderful almost 2 hours that we've
Oh my, it's been 2 hours. This is amazing, right?
I believe YouTube is going to shut us down after
Okay.
2 hours. So,
well, I'm so glad to see you. And I'll be calling you. I'll stay in touch.
Good. And
All right,
hopefully do something in the recording studio together.
I hope so. So nice speaking with you. I love talking about all this stuff. It's just been a joy. Take care.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.